I suppose there is. I mean, I suppose what we did was give it up. We actually did give it up when Freddie died, and we felt, we'd always said if one of us goes, that's it.
At 73, John Deacon finally admits the truth about Freddie Mercury. He was the man who stayed quiet while the whole world sang Queen's biggest hits. For over 30 years, John Deacon has kept his mouth shut about what really happened with Freddie Mercury. But now, at 73 years old, the secrets are finally coming out. What John has revealed about his friendship with Freddie has shocked even the people who knew them best. The truth about why he walked away from millions of dollars and worldwide fame will break your heart. Get ready to discover the real story that John Deacon kept hidden for decades. While millions of people around the world sang along to songs like Another One Bites the Dust and I Want to Break Free, very few knew the shy, gentle man who wrote them. John Deacon was Queen's bass player, but he was so much more than that. He was the steady heartbeat of one of the biggest bands ever. And when Freddie Mercury died, something inside John broke that never got fixed. John Richard Deacon was born on a summer day in 1951 in Leicester, England. His dad worked at an insurance company, and his mom took care of the family. John had an older brother named Robert, who sadly died when he was very young, and later a younger sister named Julie. When John was 9 years old, his family moved to a nearby town called Oadby. Even as a little boy, John was different from other kids. He was very quiet and liked to spend time alone. His friends called him Deeks, or DC. But what made John really special was how much he loved electronics and gadgets. While other kids played with toys, John read magazines about electronics and built little machines with his hands. He even figured out how to change a tape recorder so he could record music straight from the radio. This love for electronics would help him a lot later in life. John was a really good student in school. He passed out all his tests with great grades. But what he loved most was soul music. This type of music made him feel alive and happy. When John was 14, he joined his first band at school called The Opposition. At first, he played guitar, which he bought with money he borrowed. But when the bass player got kicked out of the band for not getting better, John took over playing bass guitar. From that moment on, he never wanted to play anything else. John played with The Opposition for 4 years. The band changed their name a few times, but John kept learning and getting better. Then in 1969, something big happened. John got accepted to study electrical engineering at Chelsea College in London. This was a really important opportunity, so John decided to leave his band and focus on school. He even left his bass guitar at home because he thought he might be done with music forever. But music had other plans for John. In September 1969, he went to see a rock band called Deep Purple perform at the famous Royal Albert Hall. They played with a full orchestra, and the concert was so amazing that it made John remember how much he loved music. Even though he was studying hard at college, he couldn't stop thinking about playing music again. Meanwhile, something exciting was happening in London. 3 musicians named Freddie Mercury, Brian May, and Roger Taylor were forming a new band. They called themselves Queen, and they were looking for a bass player to complete their group. John first saw them play live in October 1970, but he wasn't very impressed. He thought they were okay, but nothing special. But fate works in mysterious ways. In early 1971, John was at a disco when a friend introduced him to Roger and Brian. They were still looking for the perfect bass player for Queen. John talked with them and agreed to try out for the band. The audition happened in a classroom at Imperial College, and it changed John's life forever. The other members of Queen liked John right away. Not only was he a great bass player, but he was also calm and smart. Plus, his knowledge of electronics could help the band with their equipment, which was important because they didn't have much money back then. John was the youngest member of the group, but he brought something special that the band needed. John played his first show with Queen in June 1971 at a college in London. He was exactly what the band had been looking for. While Freddie was loud and exciting, Brian was serious and smart, and Roger was energetic and fun. John was the quiet, steady one who kept everything balanced. Something funny happened on Queen's first album in 1973. The band decided to credit John as Deacon John instead of John Deacon because they thought it sounded more interesting. But John didn't like this at all. He wanted to use his real name, so from the second album on, that's what appeared on all their records. Even though John was quiet in public, he played a huge role in Queen's success. He didn't just play bass guitar, he also wrote some of their biggest hit songs. Can you believe that Another One Bites the Dust, one of Queen's most famous songs, was written by the quiet guy who barely spoke in interviews? John also wrote I Want to Break Free, another song that millions of people know and love. In 1974, John talked to a music magazine about how he joined Queen. He said he met Roger and Brian at a disco and heard they needed a bass player. When he joined, Queen finally had all 4 members they needed. John admitted he never really thought they would become professional musicians. He thought they would just play music for fun in their free time. John said that making a demo tape at a real studio gave them confidence. When they took this recording to record companies, the companies were interested enough to give Queen a chance. John mentioned that Freddie and Roger were the most excited about becoming famous rock stars. Brian was more focused on his studies in science, but Freddie was the one who really pushed the band to work harder and dream bigger. John's first song for Queen was called Misfire, which appeared on their third album in 1974. It was a fun, upbeat song with a Caribbean feel. John didn't just play bass on this song. He also played most of the guitar parts because Brian May was sick in the hospital at the time. John also helped write another song called Stone Cold Crazy with the rest of the band. The next year, John wrote something very personal and beautiful. On Queen's album, A Night at the Opera, he wrote a sweet love song called You're My Best Friend. He wrote this song for his girlfriend Veronica, who later became his wife. The song became a huge hit and is still one of Queen's most loved songs today. After that, John wrote 1 or 2 songs for almost every Queen album. His biggest moment came in 1980 when he wrote Another One Bites the Dust. This song had a dance beat and was influenced by the soul music John had loved since he was a kid. The song became one of Queen's best-selling singles and was played on both black and white radio stations in America, which was a big deal at that time. In the early 1980s, John worked very closely with Freddie Mercury. Together, they wanted to make Queen's music more disco-like and danceable. This collaboration resulted in Queen's 1982 album called Hot Space. On one song called Staying Power, John played rhythm guitar to add some of that soul and Motown style he loved so much. But not everything went smoothly. On another song John wrote called Back Chat, he didn't want Brian May to play the guitar solos. John felt that Brian's rock style didn't fit the disco sound he wanted. This caused some tension between John and Brian, and they had some heated arguments about it. Unfortunately, the Hot Space album didn't sell very well, and Queen went back to their rock sound for later albums. John also worked with other musicians outside of Queen. He played bass for other bands and even worked on songs for movies. He played on some of Freddie Mercury's solo songs and collaborated with famous artists like Elton John. John once said that if he had just been a bass player his whole life, he wouldn't have been as happy. Writing songs was just as important to him as playing bass. John was much more than just Queen's bass player. He was like a musical Swiss Army knife. He could do many different things. By 1973, Rolling Stone magazine described the powerful sound that John and drummer Roger Taylor created together. They called it explosive and a colossal sonic volcano. This wasn't just because John played bass well. It was because he understood music so deeply. During recording sessions, John often picked up a guitar, especially when Brian May wasn't available. On the Hot Space album, some of the sharp, clean guitar sounds that people thought were played by Brian were actually played by John. John also liked to write music on the piano. The famous electric piano part in You're My Best Friend was written by John, even though Freddie played it on the actual recording. Unlike the other three members of Queen, John never sang lead vocals on any songs. He didn't even sing much backup vocals on studio recordings. But during live concerts, he would quietly add his voice when the songs needed it. His style was always to stay in the background but still give his best effort. John had his favorite instruments. His first bass guitar was an Echo, but through most of Queen's career, he used a Fender Precision bass. He made some changes to how it looked over the years, but it remained his main instrument. Near the end of his time with Queen, he switched to a custom bass made by a craftsman named Roger Giffen. What really made John special was his knowledge of Elay, Custronics. Remember how he loved gadgets as a kid? Well, he used this skill to build equipment for Queen. One of his most famous creations was called the Deacon amp. He built it in 1972 using old electronic parts he found in a dumpster. This amplifier became a key part of Queen's unique guitar sound, and even Brian May used it on many recordings. John mostly played bass with his fingers rather than using a pick. He admired famous musicians like those in the band Chic, Michael Jackson, and Stevie Wonder. His favorite bass players were Chris Squire from the band Yes and John Entwistle from The Who. A music review in 1975 said that John was one of the most skilled musicians of his generation, even though he was the least well-known member of Queen. Despite all this talent, John never tried to get attention or become famous. He was happy to let Freddie be the star while he stayed in the background. But to understand why John eventually walked away from everything, we need to talk about the man who was at the center of Queen, Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury was born with the name Farrokh Bulsara, but he changed it when he became a rock star. He had an incredible voice that could reach 4 octaves, and his confidence on stage was unlike anything fans had ever seen. Whether he was wearing a leotard, a crown, or performing shirtless with a microphone stand, Freddie made sure everyone's eyes were on him. When Freddie joined Brian May and Roger Taylor in 1970, everything changed for the band. Freddie had big dreams and wasn't afraid to try new things with music. He mixed opera with rock, piano with power, and soft songs with strong ones. No type of music scared him. While all the band members were talented songwriters, Freddie gave Queen its bold and theatrical style. According to Peter Freestone, who was Freddie's assistant and friend for many years, Freddie took John under his wing because he was the new person in the group. John was shy, unlike Brian and Roger, and Freddie wanted to protect him. When Queen went on tour, John and Freddie often traveled together. Over time, they became their own little team inside the band. Even though John stayed away from reporters and cameras, behind the scenes, he had strong opinions about the band's music. During the filming of their last music video in May 1991, John said that even though singers and guitar players usually get more attention, he could be just as vocal as anyone else when it came to making decisions about their music. The band sometimes had disagreements, especially about who wrote which songs. But on later albums, many songs were credited to both John and Freddie. Peter Freestone believed this was because John was the only band member who truly understood how much Freddie had helped him grow as a musician and as a person. After Freddie died, John began pulling away from Queen. He didn't do interviews, didn't appear at events, and slowly stopped making music completely. While Brian and Roger found new ways to keep Queen's music alive, John quietly stepped back from everything. John did play with Queen 3 more times after Freddie died. First, at a huge tribute concert for Freddie in April 1992 at Wembley Stadium. Then at a charity show with Roger Taylor in 1993. Finally, in 1997, he joined the band one last time for a special show in Paris where Elton John sang Freddie's parts. Later in 1997, Queen recorded one final song together called No One But You, Only the Good Die Young. It was made in memory of Freddie, and it was the last time John would ever record with the band. When Queen worked with singer Robbie Williams to re-record We Are the Champions for a movie, John was not happy. He called the new version rubbish. John didn't attend Queen's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2001. He wasn't part of any of Queen's later tours or albums with new singers. Instead, he chose to live a quiet life away from the music world. According to Brian and Roger, he still gives advice on Queen's business matters and stays involved, but only from a distance. Even when the movie Bohemian Rhapsody was being made about Queen, John approved the project but chose not to take part in making it. An actor named Joseph Mazzello played John in the film, but John himself stayed completely out of the spotlight. A friend from John's college days once said, "Maybe he thought Freddie was the band, so what's the point?" The friend also mentioned that John suffered from depression after Freddie died and might never have fully recovered from it. In April 1992, just 5 months after Freddie died, something special happened. Queen performed at Wembley Stadium for the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. This was a huge event with many famous musicians coming together to honor Freddie. That night, John did something he rarely did. He spoke to the crowd. This would be the last time John would speak in public. Brian May spoke first, promising the biggest send-off in history for Freddie. Then Roger Taylor thanked everyone. Finally, it was John's turn. He said hello, in a voice that was barely heard over the crowd noise. John thanked all the artists who were performing that day, saying they had given their time and energy to make the tribute to Freddie happen. His voice was shaky and emotional. Then he said something that fans will never forget. The show must go on. After that, he welcomed the band Metallica to the stage. That moment was both quiet and emotional, and it became part of rock history. It wasn't just a concert. It was a farewell. And for John, it was the beginning of a goodbye that never really ended. In 1997, Queen recorded their final song as the original band. No One But You, Only the Good Die Young was made in memory of Freddie, and John joined Brian and Roger for the recording. After that, John disappeared from music completely. The reason John left wasn't about money or fame. It was about love and loss. Freddie Mercury had been John's anchor, his steady support in the crazy world of rock music. Without Freddie, John no longer felt like he belonged in that world. Even today, Brian and Roger make it clear that John still watches over Queen's business decisions, but he doesn't want to be seen or heard by the public. He simply wants peace. Brian once said, "John Deacon is still John Deacon. We don't undertake anything financial without talking to him." But in public, he has vanished. Even though John left public life, he never completely cut his ties with Queen. Brian May has said that they don't make any important business decisions without talking to John first. In 2014, Roger Taylor said that John had completely retired from social contact and was a little fragile. Brian added that while they don't talk much, John still keeps an eye on Queen's finances. In 2022, Brian told a radio station that John had turned down many offers to rejoin the band. Brian understood why, saying that things had changed a lot, and while he and Roger had adapted to these changes, it might be too difficult for John. Over the years, John has been honored in special ways. In 2013, scientists even named a new species of dragonfly after him as part of a tribute to all 4 Queen members. Today, John Deacon lives a very private life. He chose to step away from fame to focus on his family and live peacefully in the same house he bought with his first paycheck from Queen. Friends and former bandmates say he prefers to keep to himself and doesn't go to public events. He hasn't returned to performing and hasn't given any interviews in years. But people who know him say he's content with his choice. John still keeps up with Queen's business when needed, but only from a distance. He enjoys his privacy and continues to live life exactly how he wants, quietly, peacefully, and away from all the noise of the entertainment world. While Freddie Mercury is no longer with us, his spirit lives on in the music, in the memories, and in the deep friendship he shared with John Deacon. That friendship helped shape Queen into one of the greatest bands in history, and even today, it still touches people's hearts around the world.